To see you all. That song was the perfect way to start this off. Love that song. So thank you, Kirsten. I hope all of you are enjoying the change of seasons wherever you are and whatever way that looks like where you live. But again, thank you for joining us today. If you were able to attend and be with us at the PCA America National Conference in Portland this past August, and you were lucky enough to catch the last session of the conference, you got to witness the powerful and inspiring Strengthened by Prevention panel, featuring 5 incredible women sharing their perspectives on the importance of primary prevention in our lives and in this country. And so today, as part of our Zooming Out speaker series, we are bringing you the encore of that panel presentation. The feedback that we heard from the conference is that the original presentation wasn't long enough, and you all wanted to hear more from these amazing women. And so this is what we are bringing you today. The only unfortunate part is that we only have half of the panel with us today. However, the women that are here have some powerful stories to share. The idea and the vision behind the Strengthened by Prevention panel is to elevate the stories of the role of prevention services and supports and policies in strengthening individuals and families and communities. And so the panelists will share stories and experiences with you around prevention services and policies, and speak to why our work in this moment in our history is so critical and so important. So I get the honor and the privilege to introduce to you Habiba Rasheed Grimes. Habiba is going to serve as both the moderator of the panel as well as a participant today. Habiba is a visionary and heart-centered leader, an advocate for healing and justice. She draws upon a rich tapestry of personal experiences and professional expertise to champion empathy, equity, and liberation for marginalized youth and families. As the founder and principal consultant of her own company, she partners with individuals and organizations to implement trauma-informed, healing-centered, and liberatory practices that improve outcomes for young people and communities. With over 25 years of experience in mental health and education, Habiba is a nationally recognized voice on trauma-informed care and culturally responsive leadership. As the former CEO of Positive Education Program, one of Northeast Ohio's largest mental health agencies for children, she led a staff of over 400 and significantly expanded the organization's capacity to provide community-based services to youth with complex needs. Habiba recognizes that trauma is a collective embodied experience and that all healing is relational. She grounds her work in the wellness of minoritized women and children with the understanding that their well-being is essential if humanity is to thrive. Believing that personal stories have healing power, she created No Crystal Stair podcast, a storytelling platform that centers the lived experiences of Black mothers raising sons to amplify the power of narrative as a tool for connection, restoration, and resistance. Habiba is a passionate board member of Prevent Child Abuse America. We are so grateful to have her on the board and so lucky to have her here with us today to moderate and participate in this amazing panel for a second time. Habiba, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll turn it to you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our panelists today for your willingness to return to this conversation. Such an honor to know that our conversation in Portland was powerful in such a way that brings us together. As we enter into this space, I am going to ask that we hold a little space, take some cleansing breaths. I don't know if you all are in conversation in the ways that I have been throughout this day and last several days around the benefits that are scheduled to be delayed on November 1st, these essential nutrition benefits, SNAP benefits for young people and families. So I am here with both the joy and excitement of being present with you all and honoring that our families are facing very serious matters ahead. With that said, I am here with two beautiful storytellers and witnesses and activists. I'm taking some liberties now in how I describe you all, but that is how I experience you doing powerful work to both heal, reclaim, and create better conditions for young people. And that inspires me so much to know that. You are in this world. I will start with Alina Fernandez, uh, a panelist here today, also present in Portland, amazing and powerful storyteller, writer, and founder of The Positive Mom. So I'm going to let her say a whole lot more about herself in a moment. And I also want to introduce Carrie Richmond, who is the founder and CEO of the Carrie Hope Company, who is also a powerful, powerful storyteller and passionate prevention expert in service to young people here in our nation. And so I'll start with Alina and ask you to please say a few more words about yourself. And I know you are just returning from Ireland with your amazing daughter, who is also a powerful storyteller. So tell us more about you and what you've been up to.
Thank you so much, Habiba. It's an honor for me to be in your presence and with everyone here today. And I also appreciate the space that you created for our concerns for our families that will be affected. So my name, as Habiba said, is Elena Fernandez. I am an immigrant to the United States and a single mother of four daughters. Their ages are 23, 22, 12, and 6. And I would be remiss if I didn't say this, and I am 4'8". That's a very important piece of who I am. And I started thepositivemom.com almost 21 years ago. And no, I wasn't 5, even though you may think that I was. And my purpose with that was to help moms break cycles, find peace, and feel whole. That is the whole mission of my organization, and it now reaches millions of moms in 168 countries, which is just a blessing for me. And through my books and my programs and my speaking, my purpose is to teach impact-centered, trauma-informed, and culturally competent storytelling to empower those we love, lead, and serve. And that's something that I've loved sharing at the conference with all of you who have attended. And speaking of that, when I participated in August at the panel, it was a sacred experience. It was just really impactful. I think all of us were in the verge of tears, and we were talking about hope and about shifting from fear to hope, which is something so relevant every single day that we're doing this work, but most importantly, in this moment in society and history. And not only in the United States, but around the world. But we know that in this particular country, we're facing so many challenges in the work that we do. And as far as how I started doing this work, I want to tell you about October of 2004. It was maybe 3 a.m. in the morning. I was laying on the cold ground in the fetal position. I just felt, the ground, the gravel on my cheek. And I, at that time, was experiencing homelessness with my then 1 and 2-year-old daughters. And I was just thinking to myself that I couldn't go on. I didn't have money or a job or a bank account. I didn't have a car. I didn't know how to drive and was terrified also about learning. I didn't have anyone in this country, in the US, that could support me. And going back home at that time, the Dominican Republic was not an option for me because I was told that my daughters were US citizens and I would be charged with kidnap if I tried to take him outside of the country. So I was just thinking, this is just hopeless. And that's, what we're talking about, hope, because I didn't think I had any and I didn't know what to do because I just couldn't come up with a list of possible solutions. And I had struggled with suicidal thoughts since I was 5 years old. So that was my only solution that I could think about. I just thought, I don't know if anyone, it really, I was just in the way. That's what I thought. And as I contemplated all of this, there was one thing that came to my mind. And if you were in at the conference, it was a picture of a magazine that I had seen when I was 7 years old. And it was a beautiful picture that motivated me to learn English. And in this picture, in this magazine that I found in a landfill right behind the little shack in the slum where I lived, that magazine showed a picture of a happy family, children who were loved by their parents, they were safe, they were healthy, they wore jeans and tennis shoes, they had toys, they had books, everything that I always wanted. And that picture, that vision led me to learn English and move out of the slum. But most importantly, in this moment in the fetal position, it reminded me that I knew English. And it reminded me, or actually it just clicked for me that maybe that picture wasn't for me because I never did have that childhood that was safe and happy and healthy, but that was possible for my daughters. And that's when I decided to start something that I do every day that I'm going to recommend that everybody do. It's called a to-be list because I couldn't come up with a to-do list. I had no idea. I was completely clueless and I had no hope. But I said to myself, I can be a positive mom. And that was the first step. I wanted to be a positive mom. I didn't have one because she couldn't. She didn't have the tools or the knowledge of the support. And I wanted to be able to empower other moms to do the same. And that is what started my journey toward this work. And as an immigrant and a mom and a multiple trauma survivor, I think that my perspective of sharing trauma-informed positivity. So it's not gaslighting positivity, it's trauma-informed, and it's sharing tools to honor the pain that we go through as parents, to process that pain and to transform it, because my belief is that when we transform our trauma, then we stop transmitting it.
That is so powerful. It's your story, Alina, just is something that holds such power and inspiration. Uh, and the way that you've just chosen to use yourself in the midst of the experiences that you have had is it's I'm left nearly speechless as I hear you share your story again. Thank you. Thank you. Carrie, Miss Carrie, please tell the people more about yourself. I know that I will be equally speechless and in awe as I hear you again.
Hello, everyone. It's so good to be in this space today and to have our follow up to such an incredible panel from August. My name is Carrie Hope Richmond, and I wear many hats in this space. I am a advocate, a storyteller, a policy strategist. I have spent much of my career advocating for policies that would support children and families in many different ways. And outside of that, am a big believer in the power of story to transform systems, to transform people, ourselves. And so I have my own consulting company that I started last year on my 30th birthday, which is Carrie Hope Co. And I also run a nonprofit called Unbelievably Resilient. Everyone on our team has personal experience in the foster care system, including myself. And our mission is to empower young people not to be ashamed of their experience in the foster care system. And so I love what Alina just said there at the end about transforming trauma. Our mission statement is transforming trauma to triumph. So believing that while you can experience post-traumatic trauma, PTSD, you also can have post-traumatic growth and wisdom. And we want to help young people to feel that and feel really empowered. And then what led me to this work? That's such a loaded question. But I would say a lot of it was seeing the many failures of the system. A big part of my story is that I went into foster care multiple times. I was reunified and ultimately adopted. My reunification failed and eventually my adoption failed. And so I see many cracks in my own story, and it has led me to be in this line of work and hopefully play any small part that I can to patch up those cracks, to build a strong foundation for the children and families coming behind me. In my own healing journey, I've learned so much about the generations above me and can just see that my story goes beyond my birth. It started way before me. And that takes a lot of the self-blame for me that I felt a lot of my life, but it also helps me to realize that if we really want to prevent trauma, we have to be proactive and we have to look at building positive experience, creating healing spaces, and helping people to feel safe in their own bodies, in their own homes, families, all of it. So thank you all for listening. Oh, one more thing I wanted to share actually that I was thinking about recently, and I think I mentioned this at our panel in August, but one of my very first times experiencing advocacy was when I was in middle school in sixth grade. And I actually found the news clipping. I can't believe I still have this. But it is from it was a Prevent Child Abuse Month candlelight vigil kickoff that I attended with one of my best friends. And I can still remember feeling that fire inside of me at the time. I always had this justice mind. It's like we have to do better for other kids, and just really wanting to contribute any small part I can. So it's crazy almost 20 years later to look back on this picture.
That's amazing. Thank you, Carrie. And the term advocate, I so appreciate you bringing that forward and really helping us to ground ourselves in the identity of advocates. And I just have to shout out Jennifer Jones and the Prevent Child Abuse America team for bringing us together, because this is just something we have in such shared experience, including our panelists who couldn't be here today, is that our lived experience has helped to inform our passion for prevention, our work in the prevention space, and our advocacy, which has really included self-advocacy in some ways first, right? I'll share a little bit about myself since I'm going to be kind of partly panelist, partly contributor, and rather moderator. My own story is that not a lot of folks necessarily know, is that my mom, raising my brother and me, so she struggled with the loss of her marriage and loss of a sense of safety within that marriage due to my father's violence toward her and toward my brother too, as a young child. And in her effort to kind of recover from that experience and start over, right? When the rug gets pulled out from what you imagine is possible, that starting over that so many parents have to do comes with a level of stress and what I think of as terror and overwhelm that quickly dysregulates their body, their nervous system, their ability to nurture us. And so, as children, and nurture their children. And so, living in an environment where my own mother was overstressed, there was a lot of intense moments in our household. And my mom, I know, loves me dearly to this day. I'm so grateful we've had a place and space to process some of this history. Um, Unfortunately, we lost my brother before we had a chance for the full healing that our family so deserved. But learning about the science of trauma, learning about the role that systems and structures and institutions play in distressing families has been so super supportive and helpful to our healing. Because once you have a sense for like, how did this happen? And it's not just a bad parenting problem, as Prevent Child Abuse America so aptly conveys. It's not a bad parenting problem. It's parenting overwhelm, it's lack of resources, it's a lack of village, right? Supports that come around families. And I think each of our stories really highlight how that can fall down. And it's just beautiful and powerful the way we are able to use ourselves and support the communities that we care about, prevent present ourselves as part of a national movement through Prevent Child Abuse America to really share a different narrative, really help our communities and our country understand that when we uplift families, whole families, and parents, we uplift children. So I want to go back to our time together in Portland. I'm so curious. It's been over 60 days now, and I'm curious, like, what's come up for you both as we've been away from that experience? What reflections um, have been with you as you thought back to that August panel? And I should say names, shouldn't I? That helps. I'll start with you, Carrie Hope.
I think for me, one of the biggest takeaways is I got to have lunch with one of breakout presenters while there. And Dr. Krugman, for those of you who know him, he is a pediatrician and he led a session looking back on the history of preventing child abuse and sort of where we are now in a pulse check. And during our conversation, it was really interesting because he shared something along the lines of talking to all of these child abuse pediatricians, people who have been in the field for decades, some of them before I was born, long before I was born. And he shared that they were in a place of having conversations about did they actually get it right? And did they actually make a difference in their work? And his whole conclusion was that he wishes they could hit a reset button. And I think that conversation has stuck with me so much since then because I've thought about the humility it takes to be an expert in your field and to have worked in a field for decades and be willing to say, maybe we didn't get it all right, and maybe we need to hit the reset button and pivot in certain places. And I think that kind of willingness to say, maybe we were wrong, is what our country as a whole needs right now. But also on a personal level, it's resonated with me. I recently took a trip out of the country to Albania. And that was a new country for me, beautiful country. But while I was there, I had a miscommunication with somebody at a store, and we kind of got into it, and we were going back and forth, and it got a little like nasty. And I left the store and I left the interaction, and I just felt so terrible. I was like worried, like, oh my gosh, was I being a Karen? And oh, I just felt like that was out of character for me. And I really just, I was not sitting well with me. I went to lunch and I told my friend, like, I'm feeling it in my body, in my chest. Like, I feel anxious about the whole thing. And my friend said to me, you could go back, like, kind of joking around. And I said, I think I will. And I think, like, in that moment, I went back and I apologized. And I said, I'm really sorry. I don't feel good about our interaction. And I don't think that it had to end in that way. And she was crying, I was on the verge of tears. And I think being able to pause in that moment and go back and admit, like, I was wrong in my communication to you, and her admitting she was wrong, it was healing. It was community healing. And what some people might see as like a small gesture, a small act, it's like those are the moments that give us practice to do it in bigger moments. And I think walking out of Portland, having had that conversation with Dr. Krugman, reflecting on what is it going to take, as we move forward to have stronger children and families, and to really experiencing healing in our communities, it starts on a personal level. And that personal level starts sometimes with humility and being able to admit we're wrong and we don't know everything. And so I'm walking away from the conference holding that closely, that it's never too late to say you're sorry. It's never too late to admit maybe you were wrong, to be curious, to look at the world and in your community in ways of what is working and what isn't working, and know that you can always pause, you can always pivot.
Such a powerful story. And um, like, I love the way that experience of humility with a scientist who has a lot of educational privilege, maybe positional power, their humility nested something in you, seated in you in a way, like how you show up in the world to embody that humility in interactions, not just our professional interactions, but our day-to-day interactions, and how that gets to be a change agent, how you get to be a change agent through those kinds of actions in the broader world, literally as part of the global community. So powerful. Alina, what reflections have you had since we were together?
Well, thank you for asking that. And I just love I could have done like 20 takeaways in the chat for Carrie's chair. But it's that sense of fangirling on each other, really. Having all these beautiful women on the panel, but all these beautiful people in the conference, and just knowing that that's what the world looks like too. So there's a lot of different discourse, and there are a lot of different spaces in this country and in the world, but we also have those safe spaces of people coming together to think about a blueprint for families to thrive, and just uniting our voices. I still have, a natural high from that, and I'm experiencing it right now, listening to you both, and even through Jennifer's introduction. It's like we are here to provide those solutions and those ideas and to move the work forward. And so that gives me hope, and that fuels me even in the darkest moments, in the moments of seemingly hopelessness, but we know that we are together, that we are not alone, and that our voices matter. And so these stories, this wisdom that we can extract from our interactions and for the work that we do, I think that it is so key. And I remember Melissa Merrick when she was talking about the conference, like it must happen. Like this is something that we need. It's a space to gather, whether virtually, in person, but it's really something that can move the work forward, and that can give us that sense of purposefulness that is going to fuel what we do every day. And so that's really and truly what I think about. And when you said, Habiba, the supports the village, it's just staying close to that village, and we have it in each other. And so when we're feeling down and we're feeling very deflated by the news and the things that are happening, to rely on each other to find that hope and that strength.
Absolutely. What I took away from the conference resonates so deeply with what you're describing, Alina. Just the power of community, the beauty and power of community. Um, this is such a hard time to hold on to hope. And yet, you're in a room of 1,200 people who are hope filled. We're hearing Carrie Hope's story of her name. Like that stayed with me, Carrie. That naming and claiming of the gift that your mother gave you to carry hope. Like, oh, I got chills just saying this now. Like that, the opportunity that represented to both grieve some of, the experiences that are happening and unfolding at this moment in history, to be present with the grief of that, and more or as importantly, be present with the possibilities that exist because we have a shared passion and intention around preventing harm in the lives of children. Like that stayed with me from the conference. I continue to hold on to it and reflect on that and seek it out here locally, right? Because that there are different local and state level spaces for advocacy and activism. It can get a little heavy. Cleveland can break my heart sometimes. And there's so much here, so many people here in Northeast Ohio, in the state of Ohio, who are yearning for, working for, and active in terms of creating better conditions. So you all gave me so much fuel and energy through that time we shared together. So I referenced this moment in history, and we got to talk about it, y'all. I know I opened up with just kind of some holding of space for the moment that we're in, and yes, seeing the fangirling. Yes, I'm there as well. Um, I think about that notion of we are the ones we've been waiting for, right? And this moment in history is like, okay, y'all ready? And so I'm curious from each of you to know, like, what do you feel is really critical to share in this moment that we find ourselves in, knowing that we are on the precipice of even more pain and suffering? And Alina, I'll start with you.
Thank you so much. I mean, I shared in the conference that stories humanize prevention. And I think that our work is more vital right now because the stories that we share have the power to shift the blaming and the shaming narratives that perpetuate harm. And as we focus on the well-being and the support to the family unit, and we share those stories of how this safe and nurturing and stable relationship and environments shift a whole life and a whole family and a whole community and society, that we can really make a difference, because through the testimonials, through the personal stories, through the organizational stories, we can influence policymakers. We can encourage the financial support for prevention-focused organizations, and to keep doing the work. Because if we look throughout history, this is one dark moment in a country that has had so many dark moments, and we have come a long way, and we will continue to come a long way as we continue to fuel our purpose. And I think through the power of not only sharing what we're preventing, but we're sharing what we are creating, because really that vision is going to fuel our purpose. And when we are energized by what we are creating together, and together we just bask in the bliss of that creation, we can really shift the narrative, but we also can shift how other people perceive the work. So it starts with those narratives. And I love how you said, it is not a parenting problem. It is not a personal problem. It is a systemic issue. However, like Carrie Hope mentioned, it starts at the individual level. So if we all share our voices, share our story, share our why, which was, brilliantly orchestrated, that we share why do we do this work, then it is going to shift the needle. It's going to move the needle toward that. And then as we paint that picture on how preventing childhood adversity and investing in family well-being is going to change families, entire communities, and society as a whole, people are going to start to get it because they're going to care. They're going to see how prevention doesn't affect just those people that they think they're not related, but that how they affect them and also the generations to come. Because this is when we prevent harm for one child, we're preventing harm for the world. And so we just kind of have to bring awareness to that. And I think that the power of telling those stories is really key right now. Stories that are going to inspire and energize, fuel prevention.
I love what you said about our stories needing to not only convey like what we're preventing, but what it is we're hoping for, what our vision is for a more healthy and whole and hopeful future for young people. That is, I'm going to be holding on to that notion. Carrie, what's feeling most urgent to share or to be thinking about in this moment of history for you?
There's so much coming to my mind. My mind is like buzzing. It's really hard to hone in on one. But a few of the ideas that are standing out to me that I'll ground in a couple of quotes, ancient proverbs is it takes a village to raise a child, African proverb, and we often draw the circle of family too small, Mother Teresa. And I'm thinking about that a lot in my life, where I'm at right now. I'm not a parent. I hope to be one day. And still, there are opportunities for me to nurture. There are opportunities for me to reach out and care for kids in my community, to show up for families, to look at friends as family. And I think we're at such a critical moment of not just focusing on our little unit, right? But that where are we able to be stronger together, to reach across and stand hand in hand, to have a shared responsibility for each other's well-being. We often say in this line of work that a child's well-being is so closely tied to their parents' well-being, and a parent's well-being can be uplifted by a strong community, to know that they are seen, they are supported, that people are rooting for their success. And I think that encouragement goes a long way. And so, right now, more than ever, I think to ask for help is so humble. And that when people ask for help, that we should do what we can, whatever small role that is or big role that is, to be able to offer that help, because it takes strength. It takes strength to say, I do need help right now. So as we're navigating this, as we've been saying since 2020, these unprecedented times, I think that we're stronger together, and that looking at new and creative ways to embrace that stronger together has never been more critical.
Yeah, I love this energy and what each of you are saying with what's coming up for me in this moment, because it is about being proximate and being in personal relationship to people impacted by structural and systemic forces that are causing harm. I think about what's ahead of us. Should there not be relief in terms of the government shutdown? Like that means like know how are your people doing? Being in community with family, with friends, as you pointed out, Carrie, with community organizations, and doing the work to discern what do you need? How can we support you? How can I support you? And I think there's a lot of power in this moment and opportunity in this moment to really step in and be on the ground in the work of staying proximate and in personal relationship with people impacted. So I so appreciate what you were sharing, Carrie. So when we were in Portland, we got real deep on personal stories, and we shared a lot about those personal stories that that our panelists had for that conversation. And we kind of started that conversation with just a bit of a definition of prevention. So I want to go back there today, this evening, because I think we cannot repeat and have dialogue enough about like what does prevention mean to you? Because when you go in different spaces and different sectors or disciplines, it may not be that we're all talking about the same things, or we're talking about different points of prevention that in some instances actually are more intervention. So I'm hoping you can help us, Carrie. I'll start with you by giving a broad definition for how you define prevention.
Thank you. For me, I describe prevention as, well, it's a mindset shift in a lot of ways. I think for a long time, we have been a reactive community or system, waiting until harm has already occurred. But I think where we're at now, we have to be more proactive. And the ways, at least in the policy world, that we've often talked about prevention, it is linear, and we'll describe front end services, back end services. But the way that I view prevention is it's a circle. And my own story, and looking back at my father's story, my grandmother's story, if they would have had the ability to heal from the pain and the trauma and the hurt they had experienced, they would already be a step ahead and in being the parents that they wanted to be. And so when I look at, how do I prevent the cycle from repeating? Because there is a history of generational trauma in my family. There is a history of child abuse. There is a history of system involvement, of domestic violence, of, I look at the tree, and there's some things that have continued to be passed down. And so to me, prevention is rooted in healing, and it's rooted in community. And we hear and heard Dr. Perry talk about the importance of relationship and how relationships help us to be resilient. And so as we think about how do you prevent more trauma, how do you prevent child abuse, I think it's rooted in relationship, healing, community, and honesty. To be able to say, here are the things that have happened in our family. And it's not something that we are going to let fester in the dark, but that we're not letting shame win. That when you have light on it and you let others in to help, that is in a big way prevention and a huge step forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Alina,
Wow.
hear
I
your
mean,
wisdom.
yes, I'm just, spending a moment with Carrie's story and all of that she's been through in her family, and the strength in your voice is just so empowering. Whew. So for me, I think, I don't remember what I said in August, but um, thinking about myself, I define myself as a word nerd. I think about, I speak Spanish and Italian also, so Latin is kind of right there. And I think about the root of the word prevent or prevention, and it has two kind of Latin roots. One is pre, and the other one is venire, which means to come. And the pre is kind of like before or anticipation. And I was thinking about that, I read the question earlier, thinking about when we think of prevention, it's usually like we're stopping something before it happens. But for me, it's more like when I look at those two words in Latin, and I think, in my trilingual brain, I think about it as anticipating what could happen. And not only anticipating what could happen in a harmful way, but also what could happen in a helpful way. And usually we have it wrong. We're thinking about the harm that someone can do because of their history, because of their what they've associated with their identity, their circumstances, the lack of whatever resources and the systemic environments. However, we can also think about, anticipate the possibility and the potential in someone. And I think, when I think about us as people, and even talking about Carrie's story, we are not defined by one interaction that we have with one person, but we are so much more than that. And I think prevention is recognizing that there is more that we can honor in people, in parents, in communities, that we can provide trauma-centered, trauma-informed services, because we see the whole person, we see what they've been through. It impact center, because we know that as we provide, we see them, we support them, we provide a safe space, they have the possibility to shift and to transform, to, like Maya Angelou said, to do better because they know better, but also because they have the opportunities that have not been afforded historically because of their skin color or their economical or socioeconomical class, as they say in my country, but also culturally competent. Because as I look at myself as an immigrant and as a woman of color, I'm an Afro-Latina, and thinking about how my ancestors were colonized and enslaved, there is so much there to unpack when someone talks to me and when someone interacts with me. So it's not only seeing what someone does, but who someone is in the ecosystem of society, their actions, their feelings, their conditions, their culture, their experiences, and to not think that adversity or mistakes are their identity, but that they are so much more than that. And they are not only, we're not only preventing harm, we're enabling good.
Oh, thank you. What's coming up for me as I think about what both your comments is like the transgenerational nature of trauma and violence. Each of us are impacted by transgenerational trauma. And that to such a great degree, we're all very much displaced from the healing modalities that might best support us because of colonization of mindset and bodies and land. And there's so much that's been taken in terms of capacity for healing. And then what I hear you sharing, Alina, is yes, and right? And how do we point ourselves to the and? Because each of us are sitting here because of tremendous resilience, tremendous ancestral power, right? That's showing up in us. And the investment of relationship from folks from across multiple dimensions of our culture, our society. And so I'm left with, as we kind of get ready to head into the Q&A with with folks here, which is so important because we didn't get to do that in Portland. But if you think about like prevention as reclamation of people and of resilience, like what would you offer to folks listening to help us maybe lean into the mindset of abundance, because there is such an emphasis on scarcity and trauma these days. What would you share that would invite us into that space? And if there are traditions or experiences that have really supported you to sustain hope and resilience as you've matured in light of your lived experiences. So this time I'll start with you, Alina.
Oof, I love that. There's a lot of talk about AI, right? And I have my thoughts about AI, but what I think is my most important AI is ancestral intelligence. And I think that's a type of intelligence that we must all tap into. And it's that, we're not only resilient at the individual level, we are resilient together as communities, as cultures, as civilizations. And there is so much that can be passed down. Not only that we can tap into, but that we can then provide a transmission to the other generations. And storytelling is one of the ways. I'm very partial to storytelling, if you haven't noticed that. However, we all have personal wisdom. Each of us has personal wisdom, what we've learned from doing the right thing, doing the not so right thing. And so I think that personal relationship that you were talking about, Habiba, is so key, because prevention starts within us, but we must not die with our wisdom. And so sharing our wisdom that was passed down from our ancestors, and then becoming the ancestor that's going to also bless the land, bless the world, share I would say, the pearls that we have extracted from our pain. I think it is key that if we all go and find a space where we can be in community sharing meaningful things. The weather is great, the news are not, but there is so much within us, and we all have something powerful to share. And it's wonderful to be pinned, highlighted here and pinned, but I think, we need to provide a space for each of us here present to share with each other and really tap into that ancestral wisdom that we carry, and those lessons that we have, that we learn every day.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad this is being recorded because you and Carrie are both dropping these gems, and you're so good, Alina, at getting it into the chat. I feel like we're gonna have a little book of affirmations and wise words. So thank you. And I'm so glad this is being recorded. Yeah, I won't add anything to what you said. That was powerful. Carrie, what's coming up for you?
For me, I just think about, when I was about 25, so about 5, 6 years ago, I was estranged from my adoptive mom, and I had this itch and desire to learn more about my story. I had always just been told all of these things about my childhood, but I wanted to understand it from my own lens. And so I started requesting files from the state of Ohio, crazy process to go through. And I remember when the file arrived, it was literally just like my birth certificate before it was edited after the adoption and my adoption certificate. And so I felt so upset, and I felt like, this is not the answers I was hoping for. And then, unfortunately, 2 months later, my adoptive mom suddenly passed away. And as I was going through her belongings, I found this folder. It was like ripped, it was like falling apart, and it had three of my names. It had two of my birth names, like Carrie Hope, first name crossed out, second name crossed out, and then it had my third name. And it was the folder, it was like my case file that they had been, passing down. And as I went through this case file, it was both devastating to read about a little girl who had experienced more than I could have ever even imagined. And this file had police reports from my parents. It had doctor's reports of my mom when she was pregnant. It had psych evaluations on my parents, on me. It had all of these reports about how I was, ripping my hair out and eating it as a little girl, and just things that I hadn't even remembered. And so that made me sad and it made me grieve for this little girl. But at the same time, when I looked at myself in the mirror and I looked at everything that I had accomplished up until that point, it was a moment of connecting with the resilience in me, but also in the resilience of my family line. And I believe I said this at the panel that the more I have learned about my family's history, the more I have realized that there is generational strength that has been passed down to Alina's point, ancestral wisdom, and healing is possible. And that while I look back and I can see all the pain that I went through, I also can see moments where it did start to get a little bit better, where my parents were trying new things compared to what their parents had done, where things were taking a small pivot. And so I do, to echo what Alina said, to look at those moments of hope and healing and know that they're possible. And Brene Brown says, story and research create change. At this point, we have so much research, millions of research reports, so many all the time. And to have the stories to complement it, we need more stories outside of Alina's and I. We need people to know they're not alone and that healing is possible and that they don't have to be trapped in a narrative. And I think that's where we're heading. And there's so much opportunity for that. And so that gives me a lot of hope. And to see everyone on this call today on a Monday at the end of a work day, that's giving me hope that people are so passionate to find solutions, to help reach beyond themselves when there is so much stress, financial stress, noise in the world, the news hitting us one after another. But to still show up for other people, to be selfless in that way, that also gives me hope. So thank you to everyone who has joined us this afternoon.
Thank you so much. That notion of conveying empathy and compassion for the ancestors before us, some of whom may have caused harm, and understanding that there is a context for that harm is tremendously powerful to embracing the strength and resilience. That thread of strength is it can be hard to grab hold to it if your perception is my ancestry is flawed, my ancestry is something to be ashamed of, or my ancestry caused me harm. And that's all we can hold on to. But to have that compassion and empathy you described, Carrie, is transformative. It is empowering in a way that I think does invite other folks. Like, think about sharing your story. Think about putting your voice in the space, because what we know from the adverse childhood experiences study is that childhood adversity is not uncommon. It is a shared experience by many people around the world, and does not require we demonize, right, our caregivers, our attachment figures, and others from our past, but it does provide us an opportunity to say, here's what might have worked better for myself, for my family. Tremendous power in that. Thank you. Thank you both. So we have an audience question here. Thank you. That I will put into the space. That question is, how do we do better with getting out of the stories that you have shared and that others, I'm sorry, how do we do better with getting out of the stories that you have shared and that others have? And if the person who asked that question is able to come off mute and make sure we understand that question.
Habiba, that was from me.
Okay.
And I think the thing that I was, so we have this this notion that shifting mindsets, right, is sort of the path we need to go down, right? That's how we're going to create change. And I think, Carrie, you said stories and research, right, are really what we need to focus on. And I think my question here is, how do we do better with getting those stories out, right? Well, they're your stories, there are other stories, and there's, as Habiba said, a lot of stories out there. How do we do better, both as a national organization of Prevent Child Abuse America, but others that are committed to this work in this field? how do we do better with getting out your stories and sharing stories that others have?
Thank you. Carrie, would you be willing to hop in
Yeah.
on that one?
I would love to.
Awesome.
Thank you. And thanks for the question, Jennifer. Yeah, so one of the things I will often say anytime I'm doing a presentation is that I'm only one perspective, that there are so many perspectives out there, and that I am the expert of my lived experience, but that there are other experts to listen and learn from. And I will just plug Unbelievably Resilient as a resource. Our website is ur-resilient.org. And there are 9 of us on our team who all were in the foster care system who have a different perspective to share. We have 3 seasons of a podcast. It seems like everyone has a podcast these days, and that's amazing. That's beautiful that people are finding their voice. But a great opportunity to get these stories out there is to look for lived experience podcasts. There are many, and they don't always get the same platform as large organizations or very famous influencers or others. And so, where can we look to uplift some of the platforms that are a bit smaller, but that still have wisdom to share? And I would say the same thing about written works. The imprint puts out a lot of opinion pieces from people with lived experience. I think seeking out those publications, and if you are a large organization, maybe talking to your marketing person and saying, every newsletter, we want to include at least something from people with lived experience. And by lived experience, I don't just mean foster care, I mean survivors of trauma. And to really expand the breadth of the materials that you're looking at. One last thing I'll flag in terms of stories. There's it's called, oh my gosh, now I'm blanking on the something belly underbelly, soft white underbelly on YouTube. And it is a man, he started interviewing people from Skid Row and asking them their stories. And every single one of their stories is rooted in childhood trauma. And we can learn so much from these individuals who are experiencing homelessness, but touch so many other systems. And a lot of it is rooted in childhood trauma, abuse, and neglect. And so that's another great resource. And I'll pause there. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for those suggestions. And I really appreciate the possibility for PCA America to be an amplifier of stories that get less attention. The democratization of information that the internet has allowed for, that the podcast platforms allow for, do require some intention on our part so that we get to those voices that are less accessible because they don't have the same marketing machines and budgets behind them. So thank you for all of those suggestions, both the written and podcast form of storytelling. Alina, did you want to respond to that in any way?
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh. So something that came to mind, I love all of those suggestions. Fangirling again. One time I remember, I travel a lot with my girls because I speak all over the world and they do too now. And there was a magazine in the airline and my daughter asked, like, why is there a letter from the CEO? Like it was just a question. And I said, that's a great question. Now that we know the CEO and what she looks like, it was a woman, which was really great for the moment. Um, Now we feel more connected to this airline because she's sharing why it's so important that we travel on this airline. And so I always use that story because we must, as an organization, share the stories of the people who are part of the organization. What is their why? Why do they do what they do? And actually storytelling can also, lived experience can also facilitate policy when you are advocating funding. I mean, there is so much, and this is why we know that emotion is what drives decision. And I always say, because I, teach storytelling in my university, that your audience, when you are telling a story, is actually not the grown-up, is that person's inner child. And so if you're thinking about how people are making decisions from what triggered them, what drives them, they make those decisions usually before they were 7 years old. And so if you're able to invoke emotion, and it is powerful. Now, something that I want to say, when you're sharing the story of somebody else, because usually we do that when we're, advocating for policy or funding or fundraising, there's a litmus test that my daughter and I developed. It's called the litmus test for representation. And you want to make sure that this story is accurate, respectful, and responsible. You want to make sure that that the person has signed off, that it's accurate, that there is not even one tiny thing that is being misrepresented. Also, that is respectful of their experience, their whatever boundary they have set, that you're respecting that boundary. But responsible is more about, is it going to propagate a stereotype that is harmful to that person in that community and identity to which that person belongs to? And so I think that if, let's say, PCA America wants to bring all of people from the board, people from the team, people from different chapters, and highlight those lived experiences so that everybody knows, guess what? We are passionate because we've lived it. We are passionate because we saw someone else living it. And as a matter of fact, someone asked me one time when I was sharing about this, well, what if I have not lived it? I said, well, why do you do the work you do? And she said, I was in college and I switched my major when I learned about my roommate and how she experienced a childhood that was completely different from what I lived. And so I said, that's your why. That's your story. What did you feel in that moment? Was it anger? Was it hopelessness? Was it a desire to shift something that you had no voice in before, sit at a table where you had no seat before? So I think that organizationally, when you send those letters from the CEO, then you humanize the organization, and then you know that it's going to resonate, and that people are going to see more than a mission statement. They're going to see faces of people who care, who have been there and want to change the world.
Thank you so much. So a reflection that I'd like to share is just there's this power and vulnerability there. It's a superpower. I've said to a friend of mine who was a guest on my podcast, like, vulnerability is your superpower. Just the way that your story, you share so openly and graciously and generously. And that is work that she's been doing to be able to share in that way. And I do want folks to know, we have a right to hold something sacred if we haven't found a pathway to sharing those things without it causing us too much pain. And I encourage everyone to be in the work of self-healing so that you can be vulnerable without it being too activating, because our personal stories really are powerful. I love, Alina, that you helped the young woman you were speaking about. Your story is the witnessing of your roommate's pain and the knowledge that that kind of pain could occur. That's the story that is going to most impact your work. That's the one to share. And I think we have work to do as a culture of making sure that stories that are shared are accurate and and shared responsibly. There was your other R, Alina, remind me, please. Respectfully. We have work to do in that regard. You see many organizations sharing the stories of the people they serve, and it doesn't quite feel like that is the right thing to be doing. And so how do we create space for safe and non-savioristic storytelling that is authentic and the ARR model of accurate, respectful, and responsible storytelling. All right, we got a couple other questions here. I think we got a little more time. So this question is, what does the future of prevention look like for you? And we talked a little bit about vision, so now we're going to get into put some meat on those bones. What does prevention in the future look like to you? So Carrie, would you be willing to go first?
I'm going to cast a bit of a bold vision. Um, my career history has been in the policy space. I started out as an entry-level lobbyist at a major law firm and lobbied on many issues with political action committee checks, which is a very interesting form of lobbying. Then I went to American Academy of Pediatrics, where I lobbied for a nonprofit with no political action committees and no checks, just a lot of passion and grit. And in both roles, I got to work on the Family First Prevention Services Act. And now, it's been since 2018 since that passed, and we're able to see some shifts in the work. But what I will say is we need a whole lot of voices, a whole lot of advocates, communities to be speaking to their members of Congress about the power of prevention, because there are a lot of very large corporations that have a lot of money to spend on Capitol Hill. And there are a lot of people who are getting left behind because of that, is how I'll try to say this. And so it's never been more critical that people practice using their voice. And when it comes to prevention, asking the young people, the families that you're working with, what is most helpful to them, and elevating that on a larger scale, on a larger level. And what I'm hearing from my time working in policy and listening to young people with lived experience is that mental health is crucial. And Think of Us produced a report a few years ago called Aging Out. They asked young people who had left the foster care system with no permanency, what is it that you need? And while they said that it was very helpful to have things like educational training vouchers and housing support, what they really needed was help healing and dealing with their trauma. And I think that speaks to what I spoke to earlier about what is prevention. And the issue there is that they also said that they don't necessarily want to be sitting on a therapist's couch once a month, that for them, they need more alternative methods of healing and support and access to alternative therapies. And so for me, I think a future of prevention looks like having funding for more creative solutions. We have a base with the Family First Prevention Services Act, and where I see it is how do we now fill in the foundation of the three pillars that set up for us? And I think filling in the foundation is looking at creative ways that we can help communities to heal, to again further prevent that pain and trauma. And so I will also reference, I wanted to mention this earlier, the Center for Mind Body Medicine is a fantastic resource. It's a doctor who leads that, and it's all rooted in how do we look past like psychotropic medications and actually get to the root and help people heal on a body base with mind body connection. And they looked at what were the ways that our ancestors used to heal. So dancing around a fire is a way of shaking that trauma out of your body. Art, things like that. Same thing applies for kids, and that's what a lot of young people have said they want. So, my future of prevention looks like listening to people with lived experience and amplifying those ideas on a greater scale, fighting back against these very powerful corporations who are taking up so much of the space that communities need their voices heard, having more communities in those powerful rooms to share their great ideas and their great visions for prevention and healing.
Ooh, thank you, Carrie. You just dropped several gems. I put a link to the Center for Mind Body Medicine in the chat. Dr. Perry is somewhere right now saying yes, snapping, clapping, all of that, because that's the the wisdom of his work is really the way in which we heal and reorganize the brain for young people who've experienced trauma, and particularly early life trauma, is through interventions that are connecting mind and body, supporting a somatosensory experience, rhythm, pattern, movement. And those are often things that are not funded. And so, to your earlier comments about like using our voice right now is still important. And it can feel like, are they even listening to us right now? It can feel like no one's listening. But as you pointed out, through your very robust career, you have seen there are dollars available around issues of concern. And so we need to leverage our voices to get attention to this issue of prevention, and one that really enables embodied experiences of healing. And then the other thing you said that was just so powerful in the beginning for me and resonant for me is center the voices of the youth. Like we aren't doing a good enough job of getting them to the table to give voice to the things that would be most supportive to them, to give voice to the pain that they're feeling and to the solutions that they want to see. So that all just so greatly resonates with me, and what I'm seeing and hearing and have lived and experienced. Alina,
Wow,
please.
that
Thoughts.
resonates with me so much too. I have a little bit of a different direction, and it's that I think when I look at our work and the people who beautifully do it and are so passionate about it, I think about my early years as a mom, and our field is filled with wounded healers. And so for me, the future of prevention is that we only use words when necessary, because our healing as healers, if you will, is going to speak for itself. And so, yes, the work is important to help others. Yes, it is important to show up. It is important to fight, so to speak. But it is very important that we do our own healing and that we sit with our own pain and that we understand how it could be vicarious as well, and to give ourselves space as organizations, as communities, as people to process our own, because sometimes we use it as a band-aid. We use the work as a band-aid for our deep, deep wounds, and they do not cover them. And so for me, I think it starts with us, and we want no more wounded healers. We want healing healers. And I recognize that as a mom, that's what really shifted. It wasn't just the desire to be a positive mom, it was doing the work for myself so that my daughters could see what it looks like, the struggle and the wrestle that is healing, so that they could see that it was possible, so that they could be inspired, so they could see a happier mom, a more healed version of mom. And so I think that each of us has the capacity to go within and look for something that's still bubbling, that's still triggered, that's still activated within us, and to say, I'm going to work on that so that when I show up to every space, words are sometimes not even necessary, that I am really living the teaching. I'm the teacher living the teaching. And so I think that's the future of prevention, for us to step into our own healed versions of ourselves.
Thank you. You have both done such beautiful and powerful healing work in your own lives. I'm so grateful for the example that you set in the world. You are both an inspiration to me. I'm sure seeing lots of hearts coming up, and I know that's true for folks here. Alina, I want to call in something you just referenced around like organizations and institutions and the people doing the work, ensuring that we are as well and healed as we can be. We all have a responsibility, I think, to us to to lean into our most aspirational selves and the wellness that we need to achieve that. There is personal responsibility there. I think that responsibility is magnified when we consider ourselves helpers and healers of other people. And I see that at the individual level for practitioners, but also at the organizational and institutional level. And I just want to share that here as those of us who have seats of leadership or impact or influence within systems or within organizations. How are we creating conditions for people to be their most well selves inside our organizations? Because as Dr. Sandra Bloom points out, organizations and systems can become traumatized and present with some of the same kinds of traumatized functioning as individuals. And as Resmaa Menakem talks about, trauma decontextualized can look like a personality, it can look like family traits, it can look like culture, and I'll argue it can also look like organization culture, organizational culture. And so we have work to do to create institutions and organizations that are operated and led by people who are doing their healing work. All right. With that, I think I turn the reins back over to Jennifer at this point. But Carrie, Alina, thank you both again. Another beautiful conversation with you that I'm so grateful to have been able to steward. Thank you.
Wow. I think you all left me speechless as well. Carrie, earlier when you were like, I have so many things going on in my brain. I feel the same at this moment as well. I'm very grateful that we also recorded this because there's so much here that we can go back and listen to multiple times over and still not get all the gems, as Habiba said, that you all shared. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Your courage and your wisdom and your vision really ground us all in what matters most, and that is that prevention is personal, and that our systems, as Habiba just said, must be designed not to punish, but to protect. We talked about this, we all talked about this. It's not a bad parent problem. It's the fact that people are living in conditions that aren't promoting health and happiness and safety. And that our systems need to, we need to not just react, but to uplift, right? You all inspire us to continue to advance our North Star, which is to ensure that all children and families are living a purposeful and happy life with hope for the future. We believe that we have an extraordinary moment, and we must seize the opportunity now to change how our society values and cares for children and families in this country. And together, through our Blueprint for Family Wellbeing, we can create a primary prevention ecosystem that truly supports families and helps us achieve our aspirational outcomes and ultimately reach our North Star. Please join us for the final Zooming Out session of 2025, which will be held on November 12th at 12 p.m. Central. In the session, we will have several featured speakers that will discuss the essential role of policy in building a comprehensive primary prevention ecosystem that supports the well-being of kids and families. It will talk about and focus on how policy shapes the systems and resources that families need to thrive, and how all of us, constituents, nonprofit organizations, community members, can drive meaningful change at both the federal and state level. Space is limited for the session, so I encourage you to register ASAP. I believe Kristen put the link in the chat. Also want to encourage you to check out our podcast called The Shift, Voices of Prevention. You can listen to not only all of the keynote speakers from our national conference in Portland, but also from our amazing panelists that you just heard from here. So thank you again for joining us today. We appreciate it. Be well, be safe. Reach out if you need anything. Thank you again to Alina, Carrie, and Habiba for your just amazing perspectives, your passion, your commitment, and the work that you do. We are honored to be partners with you in this prevention journey. So thank you again, and we'll see you all soon.